Today I want to talk about something a bit different. I'm going to talk about fishing lines, but first of all, I'm going to set the scene with a bit about trading standards, really. If I go to Tesco's and I buy a tin of tomato soup, on the back, on the tin, it says 400g, 400 grams. Tesco's know what that means. They make sure that this tin has 400 grams of soup in it. If they sell me a bag of sugar that's a £2, I don't know if it's a £2 or a 1 kilo bag of sugar, it will weigh that much net, not including the pack. Take the packet away, there will be £2 of sugar or a kilo of sugar. Same with milk. I will get 4 pints of milk. If it says 4 pints, I get 4 pints. I don't get 3.5 pints or whatever. And conversely, they won't give me, when I buy a 4-pint one, there won't really be 5 pints in there. They won't have made it bigger and given me another pint because they know how their profit margins work and they want to get it right. But you will get the 4 pints. Same if you go into the greengrocers and you say, I want a kilo of bananas, you will get a kilo of bananas. They won't say, oh, well, the scales are not very good. They're a bit dodgy. And you'll get 3/4 of a kilo of bananas. You'll get your kilo. And trading standards with scales like that will test the scales. I don't know how often they do it, but I certainly know they do it. And a very long time ago, we used to weigh in fish in Wareham, where I grew up, a little greengrocers called Best's, and they had a set of scales there with a sort of dish bowl, and you'd take a big roach or a big dace up in a bucket of water, and they put some greaseproof paper to protect the bowl, and they put it on the scales, and they issue you a little ticket, and there would be a 1/4 ounce tear, so they were always giving you an extra 1/4 of an ounce, if you like. So if it said my first ever £2 roach was weighed on these scales, and so it's £2 exactly. But because of that tear, it was actually £2 and a 1/4 of an ounce. There was a 1/4 of an ounce to allow for the bit of paper. Which brings me round to fishing lines. I'm going to talk about the fishing lines you can actually buy, the ones that I do use. There are lines that I use that you can't buy anymore. I've got some Daiwa Harrier reel line that is very old but perfectly good. It's still in boxes, kept in the dark at an even temperature. I've got some Daiwa Justron that I managed to buy some bulk spools of in a sort of 2 and a bit pound, and I'm getting on for £4 breaking strain, that isn't available in this country anymore. Someone imported a load, and you can find it on Alibaba, places like that, these Chinese websites, and it seems to be pretty cheap. However, you can't seem to find the stuff that I found, but you can find it. And the breaking strains are in a Chinese measurement, which is a sort of cross-sectional area, and you have to know that you want I think it's a 0.6 and a 0.8, which don't relate to breaking strains. It's sort of exponential as you go up through. If you want to buy it, one comment I've seen about that line, that Justron, is though it says 500 meters on the spool, you don't seem to get 500 meters. You seem to get about 350. There you go. But the stuff I've got, which was a sort of greenish, almost black color, is fantastic line. Quite what, where, how, I don't know, but it's good stuff. However, let's talk about lines you can buy. My all-time favourite waggler fishing line for roach fishing is Maxima Chameleon. It did change, I believe, its formula in the 90s. How true that is, I don't know. It said it's made in Germany. This is £2 line, 600 600 meters, 660 yards, 0.12 millimeters, 2 pounds, 1 kilo. Well, for a start, there's a difference between 1 kilo and 2 pounds. 1 kilo is about 2 pounds 3 ounces. It says 0.12. Now, to measure line accurately in diameter, you need a proper rig that costs hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. And the reason for that, measuring distances, very tiny distances, hundreds of a millimeter, costs money for a start. The problem with fishing line is it's not 100% rigid. In other words, the pressure you put onto that line when you measure it, if you tighten up more, you'll get a lower measurement than. So you need a rig that will put a standard pressure on that line when it measures the diameter to get consistent results. Otherwise, you could take two lines that are supposedly the same, tighten up. This is a digital vernier gauge, and it's reasonably accurate for quick measurements, but it's not. You can't go to thousandths of a millimeter. You can do hundreds. And this is quite a decent one, I think. I forget who it's made by, but Digimatic. It's not. I think it was borrowed by someone from work somewhere, but I've acquired it. So I can compare different lines with this and get a rough reading. With real lines in traditional monofilaments like Chameleon, two things tend to happen. One, the diameter is understated. So although it says 0.12, the real diameter is much nearer 0.14. So it's not as thin as it says it is. But it's a very usable line. You can use this on a good standard old-fashioned match rod. I use it on things like my Normark Titan 2000, Daiwa, Team Daiwa X. Good line, tough, reliable. If you hook the bottom, if you just had this and you pulled it, you would struggle to break it. If you just pull steadily and you've got good knots, it will put one hell of a bend in a rod. And the most likely reason for it to break is when you pinch on our non-toxic shot round a waggler, and there's a case for putting on a tiny bit of silicone rubber over that. So firstly, it's understated by something like 15% in terms of diameter, which, because you're talking about cross-sectionals, that's squared. So it's no surprise that far from breaking at 2 pounds, I can test it with a double overhand knot at each end with a loop, two loops, and just hook it onto a hook in my garage on a rafter, and then have a bucket and just add tubs of shot. So you're going up about an ounce at a time, and at the point where it breaks, you can then weigh the bucket, and I consistently get that to about £2.13, just under £3 breaking strain, which means it's pretty strong, it's reliable, it's good stuff, lovely for waggler fishing. It will float when it's new, surface tension. It's got a matte, sort of a matte finish, so it tends to cut through. Lovely waggler fishing line. Say you can use it on the river, still waters. Been using it for decades. A much newer line is Dave Harrell Angling Pro Match. This states it's £3, and this is 0.14. Dave Harrell, who runs this is far more accurate. That 0.14 is about right, and I would think the £3, it will break at about £3. So when you look at it compared to the Maxima, which you can't see on camera here, but it's a very similar line. This has got a shiny finish, so it's a good line for float it where you want the line to float. It will float slightly better. The density is the same as Maxima, but because the finish is different, you can treat it obviously with stuff like mucilin or a line spray. But you can more or less say these two lines are similar, but this is better for sort of stick floats and top and bottom floats like Avens and so on, Bolognese floats. Dave tends to fish heavier than £3. I like fishing quite fine, £3, this sort of break and strain line, and on a really fine stick work, that Daiwa Justron, and I've also got the Daiwa Harrier. So in the £2, and you're talking about a genuine 0.12 line, and that finer line is nicer to fish with. So you can see that Maxima's it's giving you the impression you've got a very, very strong line, and as long as you know what I've just told you, you're going to be fine with it. It's strong and reliable. And the same with Dave Harrell's Pro Match, but slightly different qualities as far as floating is concerned. Now the other line I use a lot of, but not on the reel, is Preston's Reflow Power, and this line is, as far as I'm concerned, very, very good for hook lengths. I use it up to about 0.17, 0.19, but I use it a lot in 0.10, 0.09, 0.11, then it jumps to 0.13. That's sort of my chub gear really. And again, anyone who knows this line will know that that diameter is understated. It says 0.12. Let's see if we can measure it here for you. This is not 100. This is not super accurate, but it seems to be more likely 0.11. But like I say, without a proper rig to test it. Now the breaking strain on this is 1.2 kilos, and it says £2 10 ounces, and it's quite a bit thinner than Maxima, so it's definitely thinner. If you fish the £2 Maxima that says £2 and this that says £2 10, and you pulled for a break, you would think the Maxima would break. No, it won't. This Reflow Power will break, which suggests that the £2 10 ounces is optimistic, but it's a nice line, and that's what you want. You want to be able to fish the Maxima or the Dave Harrell Pro Match. He does do hook rig line that I've never got around to testing. I've got so much line, it's untrue. But as long as you fish a finer line in diameter of this with these lines, you're not going to have a problem. If you get snagged up or broken by a fish, you want the hook length to go just to lose a hook. You don't want it breaking above the float every time, or halfway between the float and the hook length, and that's going to happen. And this, like I say, is a nice line. I think there is a much more accurately stated line from Preston. I've never bothered using it because I know what this is, how it works. I don't have a problem with it. I can just accept it for what it is. It's not as fine as it says. The breaking strain is a bit generous, but as long as I know which line to match with which hook, and 0.10 I would be matching with probably size 20s up to about a fine wire hooks up to about a 16. When I get up to a 14, starting to go to the 0.11 and so on. And if I'm using hooks for chub fishing, stronger hooks, thick, I might go on the 0.11 on like an 18, the old Drennan carbon chub. I use an awful lot of old hooks, stuff like that. Some other Italian brands are notorious for being incredibly optimistic about the breaking strength of their lines. You'll see lines of sort of 0.16 and it'll say 3.5 kilos on it, and you think, what, really? I don't know, I think they're dreaming. There have been moves in the past to try and make manufacturers more honest, and some people have sort of signed up to this about their breaking strains and the thickness of the lines. The problem is, unless everybody signs up to it, the ones that are honest then are at a disadvantage to the ones who are dishonest, and trading standards don't seem to be bothered about this blatant dishonesty. And like I say, as long as you know what you're dealing with, you can live with it. The way I test the line is easy. Like I say, just take a couple of foot double overhand knot each end with a loop. Tie a bit of string around a rafter in your garage or somewhere like that. Put down with a bit of wire hook. Make one out of a bit of a coat hanger or something like that. And then at the other end, another hook, a double hook, and a bucket with a handle, and just add weight to it. You can pour sand into it. The great thing about shot tubs is that you're adding an ounce at a time, and when the bucket hits the ground, you don't want it too far off the ground. You don't get sand everywhere or water everywhere or anything like that, so it's just crunches down and you can start again and maybe do a best of 3 just to get whatever figures you want. I hope this week I've got you thinking. Line is a straightforward thing, and bear in mind, line has a finite life. Once it's out in the sun and used, it can lose strength. Some lines are much better than others. Maxima is very good for not losing strength. The Daiwo lines, the Harrier and the Justron, have both been excellent in that regard. I've had other lines. I've used Silstar match line as hook lengths and kept spools with my gear, and tackling up with sort of Daiwo sensor. There's a line that's very underrated in breaking strain and thickness. And found that the Silstar line's gone off very quickly in the sun, and I tried it as a real line as well, and the same thing happened. It's all right when it's new, but not long after it seemed to go off, and before you know it, you've got a line that's very weak indeed, and you really don't want that. So get used to your lines, what you like, and you shouldn't have too many problems. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.